You know, this might be one of the craziest things I've ever done in the garden. This might be a wild idea. We're doing a totally unconventional garden mulch today in this video. Stay tuned to find out what that mulch is coming up. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Happy Friday. Today it is mulch day on the channel. I'm your host, Diego, D-I-E-G-O. I'm a YouTuber and I'm a podcaster, and this year in 2020, I am documenting my gardening journey with a new video coming at you every week. This week, we're taking a look back and a look forward at my journey with using wood mulch in the garden. Let's get right into it. I really want to start with basics here. When you think about water hitting bare soil, what happens? Why is that bad? Water on bare soil leads to erosion. Topsoil in your garden goes away. Not a good thing. Another negative of bare soil is sometimes water just doesn't absorb very well on bare soil if that soil surface is dry. If the water in the form of rain or irrigation comes down too hard, sometimes you can get pooling on the surface and having water just run off if there's any sort of grade on the surface. Another negative of having bare soil is if you have clay in your soil, you can float the clay to the top of the soil. Water comes down, it hits the soil surface, it starts to create a pool. The clay within that little pool on the soil surface floats to the top. When the water evaporates, the clay settles back down. If you do this time after time after time, eventually you get this layer of clay over the top of your soil, which can seal your soil off, making it harder for water to absorb into the soil. So floating of clay, another reason why you don't want bare soil. If you've ever seen bare soil, that's typically what you think of as dirt. It's cracked, it looks terrible. If you're into permaculture, if you're into biological gardening, you don't like the look of bare soil. One reason a lot of us don't like the look of bare soil is because there just isn't any biological activity in bare soil near the soil surface. That's why we call it dirt. Bare soil, less biological activity at surface. Another negative of bare soil is there is nothing separating the air from the soil. There's nothing above feeding the soil from the top, and there's nothing above stopping water from evaporating directly from the soil into the air. So bare soil, it's got a lot going against it. Typically in farming and more ecological practices, you don't want it. So what are some ways we can start to combat bare soil? We can start to add mulch to our soil. One way that you can actually mulch your soil that's not very common and is more of an old school, very old school way of mulching is just by a simple dust mulch. You don't actually add anything to your soil. You just simply rough up the top surface of your soil with a hoe, creating a dust on top. That breaks up any capillary action, slowing the evaporation of water from the soil. And it's also going to create a looser soil on top, so when it does rain, the water can percolate in through that loose soil instead of hitting a hard surface. Now that dust mulch isn't doing anything for biological activity, but hey, if you're of limited resources, if you don't have anything else to add to the top of the soil, and you just want to slow evaporation and allow water to absorb in faster and allow the soil to breathe better, a dust mulch is as easy as it goes and it's free. You only have to put your labor into it. If we move on to more organic mulches, mulches typically are added to soils to solve a lot of these problems that are negatives of bare soil. But they also provide some additional benefits. They might suppress weeds. They might cool the soil. And they also feed the soil from the top as that organic matter slowly decays. So organic mulches have a lot going for them. But organic mulches aren't just a free lunch. There are some definite negatives with organic mulches. In organic mulches, I'm thinking of things like pine needles, straw, hay, wood chips. What are some of the negatives with organic mulches? Well, one, maybe they cool the soil too much. If you're in a cold or temperate climate and you don't get summer till pretty late, maybe June, your frost date is late, and your soil is slow to heat up, a mulch is going to prevent the sun from heating up that soil, quicker. So you may need to strip that mulch off to allow the soil to heat up faster in the springtime. Another negative of organic mulches is when they do rot, part of the reason that they rot and break down is you are getting biological activity in the form of bugs happening, breaking down that material. A lot of times those bugs that are breaking down that mulch, they might be pests in the garden as well. Things like sow bugs, roly-polies. If you've ever tried to mulch strawberries with hay, a lot of times you will find, yes, the hay works great keeping the soil surface cool and moist, but you'll notice a lot of those roly-polies like to eat the strawberries that you're trying to cultivate so well. Another big issue with organic mulches is you can't directly seed into them. Whether you're doing that by hand or you're using a tool like a Jang seeder, the mulch physically prevents you from seeding into it. You have to move the mulch, you have to be the Moses and part the Red Sea of mulch to put your seeds down. Not a huge negative, but it is a negative nonetheless. In the past, I've tried different organic mulches, things like straw and hay. I've used alfalfa and I've just used common straw. The negatives of those are, if you're using a hay, you could bring the seeds of those plants into your garden, thereby introducing a potential weed problem in the future. I haven't had a huge problem with this, but when I have used hay in the garden in the past, things like alfalfa, people freak out because they're saying, oh my God, all that stuff is gonna go to seed and you're gonna have fun with it, a lot of fun, weeding it when it grows up. I haven't had that issue, but it is a potential problem if you're using hay. If you're using straw, that's just the stalk of the plant. The seed heads are gone at that point. I've tried that in the past, and one reason I don't like that is it tends to break down fairly quickly. It is a resource that I have to renew from outside of my property. I have to buy that straw. Out here, a California square bale goes for something like $16 to $18 a bale. You know, if I'm buying one or two of those a season, not the cheapest thing. It is feeding the soil, I get it, but it is something that you have to replace. If you're not looking to bring a lot of outside inputs in, if you don't want to spend a lot of money, well, using a mulch like straw is something that is going to cost you because you are going to have to replace it. One other big negative, and this may or may not be a concern for you, is a lot of times if you're not buying certified organic hay or alfalfa or whatever you're using, you are potentially bringing in GMOs or pesticides into your garden. I don't really have a problem with that because I think it is minimal and I don't think it's that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, but some people get really, really worked up about that. So be careful about bringing in non-organic hays and straws into your garden if that is something that really worries you, because there is likely some sort of pesticide, herbicide, fertilizer residue still on that straw when it comes into your garden. If we stay within the organic realm, we can move from more green species to more woody species. We go from hay to wood chips. I've experimented with wood chips in the past on my beds. I don't love it. Part of the problem I have with wood chips on the beds is just where I live. I'm in Southern California. There aren't a lot of deciduous trees. There's a lot of palm trees and other types of trees like that. Typically, when they grind those up, they don't make the best looking mulch. They call this type of mulch gorilla hair because when you grind up a palm tree, it's very fibrous. I don't like the way it looks. It's not fun to walk on barefoot or kneel on. I don't love the look of palm mulch, and a lot of the mulch you do find out here is palm mulch. When you do find mulch from deciduous trees, a lot of times that mulch is chipped up pretty rough. It's not in small, tiny little bits like you see in this back to Eden method that a lot of people use. The wood chips that we get out here are big and chunky. They're closer to decks of cards than they are to Skittles. If I could get good access to hardwood mulch the size of Skittles and Tootsie Rolls, I would, but typically what I'm getting are full-size Snicker bars and decks of cards, and that is just big and cumbersome. It doesn't sit on the bed well. It makes a mess. It's no fun to walk on. I don't love the look at it. so that's why I haven't used wood chips personally much out here in the past and why I don't use them today. But despite my experience with wood chips in the past, I still get so many people telling me you should just put wood chips on your beds. And that has always kind of nagged me a little bit. It's kept me curious about the benefits of wood chips. We don't get a lot of rain out here. It is hot in the summer. I see the benefits of mulching the soil. I get it. But I couldn't find a good source of wood chips. So kind of the wood chip solution was an imperfect solution. So I decided to try something radical, something. It's a little bit crazy. It's kind of one of those, it doesn't quite make sense when you see what it is. But I decided to use these, ta-da, on my garden beds. That's right. I decided to use wood shavings meant for animal bedding on my garden beds. This is brand new wood shavings straight out of the bag. Why these? Well, for a few reasons. One, the size is super consistent. All these wood shavings, they're the same size. That makes things really great. They're light, they're fluffy, so if you're going to put them on the soil surface, to work around them, to kneel on them, to walk on them barefoot, it feels almost like you're putting cotton or something like that on the beds. These aren't your typical wood chips. They are fluffy and they're nice. They're screened a lot of times. There's no dust in them, so they're easy to work with. They come in bales, which is perfect. You can throw them in the trunk of a car. You don't need to put them in the bed of a truck. They're easy to pour onto a bed. They're easy to move around given that they're in bales. If they're in bales, you can kind of easily gauge, okay, how many bales do I need per bed? All positive benefits when you have something kind of unitized in a set volume. So from that standpoint, I loved the idea of using these. The negative of using this chicken bedding on the garden beds was it took a lot. I mean, a lot of chicken bedding to do a 40-foot bed. And it was probably 2.5 to 3 bales, and I'm at like $20 to $25 somewhere per bed. How much money do you really want to spend on mulch in your garden? That was even pushing the limits for me, and I'm making videos trying this stuff so I can kind of justify spending some money like this on this type of stuff. But for the average person, I'm gonna say that's too much. What about you? I mean, is that too much for you? Let me know in the comments below. I'm guessing it's too much. So you are paying for the luxury of using nice, uniform, soft, fluffy wood shavings over wood chips. If you can't get good wood chips, maybe this is the alternative. Now, I have looked at wood chips from places like Lowe's. The problem is a lot of those wood chips now, they paint them, they color them, and I don't really want that coloring and that paint in my soil. So if I could get bagged straight up wood chips at a cheaper price per unit of volume than wood shavings, I might consider that in the future. Nonetheless, I went on and I tried the wood shavings on the bed, and here's how it went over a full summer season. The very first thing I did is I went through and I weeded the row just to remove any weeds that were on that soil surface prior to applying the wood chips. Then I spread out a thick layer of wood shavings all across the surface of the bed. And when I say thick, I mean thick. I'm probably putting the wood chips on a good 2 to 3 inches thick because there's a lot of airspace. It's not like pouring sand onto the bed where you're getting a lot of sand per unit of volume. These wood chips are real fluffy. They're just mounded up. So even at like 3 inches thick, if you crumpled those wood chips up into a ball, you'd get this like tiny, tiny little ball of wood chips. So it's not as much as you'd think, yet to put it on that thick, you need to use a lot of wood chips. Could I have gone thinner? Probably. But I was really trying to put it on thick enough where I couldn't see the dirt below and where I really felt like, okay, this is going to provide some sort of insulating effect keeping the sun off the soil surface and slowing down evaporation. So I put the wood chips on pretty thick. Given that they go quick, you're going to need a lot. This is not a cheap mulch, as I've said before. And here we are looking at a partially finished row. I did leave part of this row unmulched as a bit of a control, so I could look at the part of the bed that was mulched and compare it directly against the part of the bed that wasn't mulched. So really same soil, same types of plants, growing in the same bed. Some have mulch, some don't. Let's see how they did. Overall, when I look back at the results of using this all last summer and through the fall, these wood shavings worked good. One of my worries going in was they weren't going to stay in place. They were so light and so fluffy, I was worried I was going to walk on them and kick them, and they were just going to go everywhere. They were going to start in one bed and migrate into another bed, and it was just going to make a mess. That didn't happen at all. They really compressed as you walked on them. They stayed, for the most part, where they were laid, so that was good. They looked good. I really like the color of them. I like how they looked in the bed. I'm big in terms of aesthetics when it comes to looking at things, so I wanted my garden to look nice. And I thought these looked really nice in the garden over the course of the season, even when you walked on them. They definitely kept the soil moist, as you can see here. If we pull back some of the wood chips, the soil right underneath the surface was moist. Asterisk, but I was also irrigating the tomatoes in this row a lot every single day for about half an hour or more a day, depending on how hot it was during the year. So that soil was going to pretty much be moist regardless, even the areas of that row that weren't mulched. The soil near the surface was pretty moist because it was just getting a lot of water. So I can't really say that the mulched soil looked better than the unmulched soil. Honestly, I don't know if it looked any better. When I think about how the plants did in that row, at one end of the row, I had peppers under mulch. They did great. At the other end of the row, I had tomatoes with this wood chip mulch around them, and then I had tomatoes without wood chip mulch. I can't say that the tomatoes without mulch did worse, and I can't say that the tomatoes with mulch did better. You could kind of look at any of the plants and say they all did about the same. Given that, and given the cost involved, given the time to spread out the mulch, I'm not sure that there was really a net benefit to using those wood shavings in the garden. I spent money on them, I spent time putting them down, and I'm not sure that the tomato plants did any better because that mulch was there. Given that, is it worth it? I don't know. I probably wouldn't do it again. I took about half the mulch off that bed and I raked it up. It actually raked up really nice, so I didn't get a lot of wood chips left in the soil surface. But I raked it up and then I just used it in my chicken coop. So it wasn't a total waste. I could use that in another way, and I put it into the chicken coop, and the chickens actually loved it because as I raked it up, I got a lot of the roly-polies and things in the mulch, and the chickens enjoyed picking through the mulch and eating those up along the way. So recycle in one way. And then the other half the bed I really raked to one end, and you can see what that mulch looks like right here. I just had a frost last night, and the tomato plants that I've had going since September 1st finally died off, but they've been growing in this mulch for the past 4 or 5 months, and they look really good. So the mulch physically held up well. It kept moisture in the soil. It worked good. Was it a net benefit? Yeah, I don't know. I'm just not sold on the back to Eden gardening method. If you have really good soil and you are taking good care of your soil, I don't think that adding straw to your soil surface, adding wood chips to your soil surface, or doing other procedures like compost teas are going to change the game that much. If you're already operating from a good base, it's really hard to get much better. It's kind of like incrementally better. If you're already at 90%, you're doing all this work to try and go to 95%, and it's just really hard to get to 95%. Now, if you have really crappy soil and you're trying to build soil and your soil's poor, I love the idea of adding mulches and organic matter to the top to build soil from the top down. That makes a lot of sense. If your soil's at a 20 and you're trying to get to 90, back to Eden in these ways are a great way to get closer to 90. But again, if you're starting with great soil, I'm not sure it's going to help that much, and it might actually be more work, more cost, and more of a net negative than it is a positive. Coming up, you're going to see a video that I did showing my soil test results. I have really good soils, spoiler alert, which is one reason I don't think that this mulching on the bed surface really helped to begin with. And starting from a good base, not much of a help. So going into next year, I'm going to try covering the soil surface, but with another alternative material. I don't want to tell you what it is yet. You'll see that coming up in a future video this spring. But I am going to try something else under the tomatoes to try and make the tomatoes grow better. It's just not going to be a mulch. So think about what that might be. Get your brain working. At the end of the day, the verdict on wood chips has a purpose. Definitely provides a solution in the right context. That's really the key to so many things, tools, methods, techniques. It all depends on your context. In my context, I don't think it really helps that much in the vegetable garden. Those are my results. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment below. More videos to come documenting the journey, and stay tuned to find out what that alternative mulch will be later in the spring. Until then, be nice, be thankful, and do the work.